Hey everyone, ready to go back in time. We're tackling 90s fashion today, and let me tell you, it's a wild ride. We're talking grunge, minimalism, the works. You guys sent in some awesome stuff for this deep dive.
It's going to be fun.
It really is, especially this excerpt from Zara's '08 fashion in the 90s between grunge and minimalism. Talk about a fashion face-off. Flannel versus silk, ripped jeans versus like tailored suits. What a time.
It's so interesting, right? You had these total opposites going head to head. The 90s were all about contradictions, and fashion was right there in the thick of it.
For sure. I mean, on the one hand, you had grunge like exploding out of the Seattle music scene, all raw energy and rebellion. We're talking ripped jeans, oversized flannels, Doc Martens, anything BOT, that 80s glitz.
Totally. Bands like Nirvana, Pearl Jam, they weren't just making music, They were giving a voice to this whole generation that was over the materialism, all that 80s excess. And Kurt Cobain, like it or not, he became a fashion icon. Suddenly it's all ripped jeans and that green cardigan. It was a movement,
It's wild how that happens, right? It wasn't some calculated thing. It was real, people wearing what they believed in. And it just blew up. But here's where it gets really interesting. Grunge didn't stay underground for long. It went from thrift stores to like high fashion runways almost overnight.
I know. It's almost unheard of, right? That jump from the street to high fashion is what makes grunge so unique. Take Marc Jacobs, for example. His 1993 Perry Ellis collection, he was putting grunge on a pedestal, right alongside couture. It was bold. It was risky. And man, did it shake things up.
Big time. Critics were freaking out, some of them, like, this is the end of elegance. But then you have designers like Anna Sui, who's all about that romantic bohemian vibe. Even she found ways to work grunge into her stuff. And it wasn't just like chucking a flannel shirt over a slip dress. She was playing with textures, layering lace, velvet, all with those distressed fabrics, this awesome mix of edgy and feminine.
Right. And that's what's so cool about how grunge hit high fashion. It wasn't just copying, it was interpreting. Designers took the core, the distressed look, the oversized fits, and made it their own.
And that's how trends evolve, right? Yeah. Remixed, reinterpreted, they take on a life of their own. But as much as grunge was about raw expression, on the flip side, you had minimalism and, well, it was kind of the opposite.
Minimalism was like a breath of fresh air, this reaction against all the visual chaos of the 80s. It was back to basics, clean lines, neutral colors, keeping it simple. But not just plain, This was about luxurious simplicity, amazing fabrics, perfect tailoring, timeless elegance.
And when you say minimalism in the 90s, you got to talk Calvin Klein. His designs were like the definition of understated chic. Those minimalist slip dresses, the pantsuits, that muted palette, he stripped it all back, pure and simple.
Totally. And Jill Sander, too. Her stuff was all sharp tailoring, incredible details. But it wasn't just the clothes, right? It was the whole attitude, confident, sophisticated, that effortless cool.
Like the anti-grunge almost. And yet they were both pushing back against the same thing, that over-the-top 80s look. It blows my mind how two totally different styles come from the same place,
It shows you how diverse that decade was.
Yeah.
And minimalism wasn't just one look either.
Yeah.
Like Helmut Lang, he brought this cool urban edge to it.
Right.
Clean lines, minimalist vibes, but with those sportswear influences. It was effortless, wearable, very of the moment.
Yeah, he blurred those lines between high fashion and streetwear, which was huge in the 90s. And this minimalist thing, it wasn't just on the runways either, it was like it seeped into everything, even pop culture.
Oh, totally. Think The Matrix, Neo in that long black coat, Trinity's leather pants, totally minimalist, but also powerful, kind of rebellious.
Right. And that's what's so cool about fashion. It's like a single piece of clothing can mean so much. It goes beyond the fabric, the stitching. It's a story, an attitude, a way to express yourself. And speaking of expressing yourself, we got to talk about those 90s supermodels. Talk about icons. Naomi Campbell, Cindy Crawford, Claudia Schiffer, Kate Moss, Linda Evangelista, Christy Turlington. I mean, come on. These women weren't just modeling clothes. They defined a whole era.
Larger than life.
Yeah.
They were more than just models, for sure. Not just pretty faces in a magazine. They were everywhere. Billboards, TV, magazine covers, you name it.
They were everywhere.
But they also had the personalities, the smarts, to back it up.
Yeah.
They knew their worth, negotiated their own contracts, launched their own brands. They became like global brands themselves.
They were like the original influencer entrepreneurs.
Oh, my God.
And they had such a huge impact, not just on what people wore, but how the whole fashion industry worked. It was a big deal. But okay, it wasn't all glitz and glam. The 90s also gave us that whole heroin chic thing, which, looking back, was pretty controversial. It really brought up this conversation about beauty standards. Like, what's the fashion industry's responsibility here?
Right. It's a complicated time, for sure. You had this movement celebrating diversity, being yourself, all that. But then you also had this very specific body type, super thin, often unhealthy, being put on a pedestal.
Yeah, like be yourself, but only if yourself fits into this very narrow mold.
Exactly.
It's a good reminder that fashion, it's never just about the clothes. It's about our values, our insecurities, those societal pressures we all feel, you know?
Totally. And as big as grunge and minimalism were in the 90s, it was a way more diverse decade fashion-wise than people remember. Like, a total melting pot of styles, old and new, all mashed up together. Designers were pulling inspiration from everywhere.
So true. Sportswear went mainstream. Like, sneakers were suddenly cool to wear with everything. And then there's that whole vintage revival.
Oh, yeah.
70s flares and platforms, 60s miniskirts, even touches like Victorian lace. Every decade got its moment in the spotlight.
And the accessories. Don't forget the accessories.
Oh, tell me about it.
Chokers, platform shoes, those tiny sunglasses, bucket hats. It was more than just accessorizing. It was making a statement. You could personalize your look even if you were, like, all about that minimalist vibe.
Totally. It's all in the details, right? But beyond those mainstream trends, you also had these incredible designers pushing the boundaries, changing how we thought about fashion.
Yeah. Designers like Alexander McQueen, John Galliano, Tom Ford.
Yeah.
They brought this whole new level of drama, this theatricality, to the runway. Especially McQueen. He was a visionary.
Totally.
His shows were legendary, dark, romantic, often controversial. He wasn't afraid to make people think, to use fashion to say something about the world.
He was a true artist.
Bubble.
And he paved the way for so many designers today, those who aren't afraid to take risks, to be different, to use their platform for something bigger. But the 90s wasn't all about high fashion, right? It was also when fast fashion really took off.
So true. Brands like Gap, Zara, they totally changed the game. Suddenly, trends were changing faster than ever, and people could actually afford to keep up, you know?
Which had its good and bad sides, right? On the one hand, fashion became more accessible to more people, but it also fed into this whole throwaway culture. Clothes became disposable.
Yeah, it's a tough one. No easy answers there. But it's something we need to think about, all of us, how our choices affect the environment, the people making our clothes. It all matters.
It's about finding that balance, right? Being into fashion, but making conscious choices, going with what aligns with our values. It's crazy how much we've talked about, and we've only, like, scratched the surface of 90s fashion. But I gotta say, what gets me is how big of an impact that one decade had. It really was a turning point, you know?
Yeah.
Like, leaving behind that 80s excess and going for something more real, more about individual style.
Right. And that's what we remember about the 90s, right? That whole idea that fashion can be like your own personal statement.
Yeah.
Aligning with a subculture, wearing your values on your sleeve, it wasn't just about following trends blindly. It's about making those trends your own.
Totally. Taking those influences and, like, remixing them into something that feels authentic to you. And we see that even now, right? All these 90s trends are coming back. Slip dresses, mom jeans, chunky sneakers, but with a new twist, you know?
Exactly. That's what's so cool about fashion. It reflects where we are now, but it's also this conversation with the past. We're always looking back, taking inspiration, and giving those iconic looks a modern update.
Like, this back and forth between then, now, and the future makes you wonder, like, what will people think about the way we dress today? What will be the trends of the 2020s, you know?
Ooh, good question. I think they'll see this focus on individuality, expressing yourself, sticking around, but maybe also this return to craftsmanship, you know? Choosing quality over quantity, really being aware of how our clothes impact the environment.
I hope so. It feels like we're moving towards conscious consumption where style and sustainability can actually go hand in hand.
Definitely. That conversation's getting louder, and it's exciting to see where it takes the future of fashion.
For sure. Well, on that note, I think we got to wrap up this awesome deep dive into the iconic trends of the 1990s. It's been so fun, like, taking a trip back in time. And it really makes you think about how our clothes say so much about who we are, what we believe in.
Couldn't agree more. It goes way beyond just the clothes. It's a language, a way we communicate, a powerful way to express yourself.
Perfectly said. Thanks for coming on this awesome 90s journey with us. And hey, listeners, we want to hear from you. What 90s trend would you bring back? Hit us up on social media and let us know. Until next time, stay curious.